Knowledge, used 172 times in 169 verses of the Bible. The art of defeating ignorance and gaining knowledge, both divine and natural.
Pretty much everything was taken from him, and he had the right to be angry at God for injustice. But he turns out giving himself to God and being great. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Rod Hembry.
And I'm Corey.
And this is Quick Study Program designed to take you through the Bible in 1 year. Corey, today, I'm excited about this.
Are you?
Because this is Daniel, and he is an amazing prophet. We are reading Daniel. Our assignment is 1 through 2. I call this Agents of Truth. And here is Daniel, who is brought into the Babylonian Empire. They're going to brainwash him. Mm-hmm. You know what? Didn't work. He actually ended up influencing them. It's a great story. Stay there. We'll talk about it in a moment. What are you going to do today?
Well, we're exploring that very empire that attempted to brainwash Daniel. We're going to be taking a look at an inscription from Nebuchadnezzar and also reconciling the lineage of kings that we see in Daniel as well.
Excellent. The Babylonians like the stars, but we'll take a look at Ryan for today's Cosmic Mysteries. Ryan?
Today, we're studying the life of the father of physical astronomy. His name? Johann Kepler. That and more coming up.
Today, as we study through the book of Daniel, you and I are going to take a look at the king Nebuchadnezzar and specifically focus in on an ancient inscription that has been found that definitely mirrors the words of Nebuchadnezzar recorded in the book of Daniel. Nebuchadnezzar, like many kings, received mixed reviews in the Bible. Interestingly, it is this pagan king of Babylon responsible for the destruction of the Jerusalem temple and the slaughter of many Judeans that is quoted praising God in his later life. Nebuchadnezzar was named after the Babylonian god of wisdom. According to Daniel and an inscription found in the late 1700s, Nebuchadnezzar took that to heart. He was the embodiment of power and supernatural wisdom, boasting in his greatest achievement, his beautifying of the city of Babylon. What we today call the East India House inscription parallels the boasts of Nebuchadnezzar recorded in Daniel. This black stone inscription was carved at the order of Nebuchadnezzar to record his glory. Daniel chapter 4 records the boast like this: "Is this not Babylon the Great that I have built by my vast power to be a royal residence and to display my majestic glory?" Nebuchadnezzar's East India House inscription reads, "Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, renowned ruler, the heroic son of Nabopolassar. The walls of Babylon I extended all the way round the city. I carefully fortified these defenses and fitted Babylon out to be a city of treasures." From the rest of the inscription, archaeological remains, and historical accounts, we also know Nebuchadnezzar built at least 3 palaces, a ceremonial path for Babylon's chief god, and several temples, all lavishly decorated. He also built an enormous moat around the city and gates to the river Euphrates covered with bronze. An estimated 15 million baked bricks were used in his public building projects alone. This king of power may have gotten away with it too, if only he didn't have a prophet of God in his courts.
It's time to explore the wise guys of the Bible. We are reading today from Daniel 1 to 2. We're going to focus on this. In 626 BC, Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar defeated the Assyrian Empire, bringing Jerusalem and Judah under Babylonian control. When Nebuchadnezzar perished, his son Nebuchadnezzar ruled. The demise of Judah was imminent. This ancient and famous Babylonian king was the architect of one of the 7 wonders of the world, the Hanging Gardens that he built for his wife. Daniel was a priest who was exiled to Nebuchadnezzar's city and made a slave to the king. But Daniel and his friends were powerful and able to confront the king's wrongs. This is the first 5 chapters of Daniel, and it reports God's work in the ancient kingdom of Babylon.
In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand with some of the articles of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar to the house of his God. And he brought the articles into the treasure house of his God. Then the king instructed Ashpenaz, the master of his eunuchs, to bring some of the children of Israel and some of the king's descendants and some of the nobles, young men in whom there was no blemish, but good-looking, gifted in all wisdom, possessing knowledge and quick to understand, who had ability to serve in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the language and literature of the Chaldeans. And the king appointed for them a daily provision of the king's delicacies and of the wine which he drank, and 3 years of training for them, so that at the end of that time they might serve before the king. Now from among those of the sons of Judah were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. To them the chief of the eunuchs gave names. He gave Daniel the name Belteshazzar, to Hananiah, Shadrach, to Mishael, Meshach, and to Azariah, Abednego. But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's delicacies, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the chief of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Now God had brought Daniel into the favor and goodwill of the chief of the eunuchs, and the chief of the eunuchs said to Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who has appointed your food and drink, for why should he see your faces looking worse than the young men who are your age? Then you would endanger my head before the king. So Daniel said to the steward whom the chief of the eunuchs had set over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, Please test your servants for 10 days, and let them give us vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then let our appearance be examined before you, and the appearance of the young men who eat the portion of the king's delicacies, and as you see fit, so deal with your servants. So he consented with them in this matter, and tested them 10 days. Daniel chapter 1, verses 1 through 14.
This is the weekend edition of Quick Study Television. Thank you for staying with us as we go through the Bible in 1 year. My name is Rod Hembry. We are looking at one of my favorite prophets of all time. I have 4 favorite major prophets, 12 favorite minor prophets. And you know, this Daniel is an amazing guy. And we're going to experience his life both in Babylon and Persia over the next few days. If you watch on Quick Study on Monday, And Tuesday, you're going to hear more about Daniel, but let's focus today as we introduce this man who is in exile. It's the 5th century BC. We have 14 verses to look at today and draw 3 wisdom points from. So let's take a look at the first passage of Scripture. Daniel chapter 1 verse 1 says this, "Here is the word of God. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem, and he besieged it." Jeremiah had prophesied that. "And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into the hand," that is, hand of Nebuchadnezzar, "and some of the articles of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar, to the house of his God. And he brought the articles into the treasure of the house of God." Here's the point. Very interesting. Agents of truth are planted in every generation called by God for that generation, even a rebellious and evil generation. So what we can learn from the first couple of verses of the book of Daniel is God willed that this exile happen, and God has Nebuchadnezzar, through his own lust and desires, he draws him in, this king. He's going to, we get to Daniel 4, you'll see, he's going to experience an encounter with the real God instead of his god Marduk. So God has placed Daniel and his friends in the midst of this evil empire. Fascinating. Now let's read on because it gets even better now, beginning with verse 3. "Then the king instructed Ashpenaz, the master of the eunuchs, to bring some of the children of Israel and some of the king's descendants, and some of the nobles, young men, in whom there was no blemish, but good-looking, gifted in all wisdom, possessing knowledge, and quick to understand, who had ability to serve the king's palace, and whom they might teach the language and the literature of the Chaldeans. And the king appointed for them a daily provision of the king's delicacies, and of the wine which he drank, and 3 years of training for them, so that at the end of that time they might serve before the king." Now, before we get to the point, let me mention here that it looks as if Nebuchadnezzar is going to do a program, an education program in Babylon. He's going to brainwash these people who've come from the temple at Jerusalem. He's going to fix them. He's going to educationally correct them. But it backfires. It doesn't work. Beloved, may I say this before we get to the point, that every time the enemy of our souls, Satan, tries to move God out of the hearts of men and women, it always backfires. And men and women who are trying to do the moving are the ones that encounter the real God. This is exactly what happened with Daniel. Here's the point. As we focus on this, agents of truth cannot be programmed by evil, but rise up over evil through the power of their godly call and devotion. Daniel was called. Even though it looks like he was captured by the king, he was actually called by God. Captured by an earthly king, but called by God. Now, you may be feeling captured right now by your circumstances, but may I remind you, if you love the Lord and you're devoted, you're actually being called by God to overcome those circumstances. Well, let's read on because now it starts to really get interesting. So after all of this, now from among those of the sons of Judah were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. To them the chief eunuchs gave names. He gave Daniel the name Belshazzar, and Hananiah Shadrach, and to Mishael Meshach, and to Azariah Abednego. But Daniel purposed, look at this line, verse 8, Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with a portion of the king's delicacies, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the chief eunuchs that he might not defile himself. And now God had brought Daniel into the favor and the goodwill of this chief eunuch. And the chief of the eunuchs said to Daniel, "Well, I fear the Lord my king, who has appointed for you food and drink. Why should he see your faces, looking worse than the other young men who are your age? And then you will endanger my position, my head before the king." So Daniel said to the steward, who was the chief of the eunuchs, he said, who had been set over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, he said, "Please test your servant for 10 days and let them give vegetables to eat and water to drink, and then let our appearance be examined before you and the appearance of the young men who eat the portion of the king's delicacies, and as you see fit, so deal with your servants." So he consented with them in this matter, and they tested them 10 days. Now here's the point. Agents of truth are courageous in their generation because they are faithful to God, the God of the Bible. Faith means they are willing to be tested. Here's what happened. They won. They decided to be devoted to God. Daniel and his friends, they said, "Test us, go ahead and test us." So he did. And they, at the end of the 10 days, looked better than everybody else. What a witness, what an impression. We are to be testable in this generation.
Now, as you read through the book of Daniel, you might notice that it's not entirely written in chronological order. The chapters jump back and jump forward in time some of the time. Right now, you and I are going to look at a king who is talked about sort of out of order. Nebuchadnezzar II has been called the last great king of the Neo-Babylonian Empire. He had taken over the kingship from his conquering father, Nabopolassar, who had allied the Babylonians with the Medes and Persians to annihilate Assyria. Leading the army was crowned prince Nebuchadnezzar. Once Assyria was overthrown, smaller nations subdued and rebellions squelched, including Judah's rebellion that ended with the destruction of Jerusalem's temple, the now King Nebuchadnezzar turned his focus to building Babylon and even collecting ancient artifacts for public display. The relative stability that Nebuchadnezzar provided for his 43-year reign died with him. His son, Evil Merodach, undid some of his father's decrees before being assassinated by his own brother-in-law, who himself reigned 4 years before his own death. Next in a chaotic line of men trying to fill Nebuchadnezzar's shoes was the usurper's young son, Labashi-Marduk. He lasted only 9 months before his assassination. Several years of embarrassing, dangerous instability prompted a man of common blood to become king. Nabonidus, an elderly army officer, did bring a type of stability to the throne, but also some bizarre behavior. Nabonidus was a dedicated worshiper of his mother's god, Sin, which seems to have interfered with his royal obligations to Babylon's chief god, Marduk. Nabonidus' solution to this was co-regency. His son Belshazzar became acting king in Babylon, while Nabonidus moved away to focus on his own interests. This co-regency, though only recently rediscovered, has always been reflected in Daniel chapter 5 that reports the taking of Babylon by Persia. The father-son duo of Nabonidus and Belshazzar marked the end of the Neo-Babylonian Empire.
In the month of September, Quick Study TV offers unique and inspiring Bible commentary on the 12 minor prophets and the 4 major prophets in the Bible. The late Dr. Ron Hembry brings us closer to the world in which they ministered, revealing amazing unknown facts about the truth of their prophecies and how they affect us today. Now, all of this commentary and more are offered in audio MP3 format this month on an exclusive, beautiful USB key drive. It fits into your computer, your carport, even CD players with USB supports. You can save the files to your computer, copy them to your MP3 player, iPod, iPad, or iPhone. And this beautiful key drive featuring the audio teaching of Dr. Ron Hembry on the prophets is our special gift to you this month for a suggested donation of $25 or more. When you participate in giving to Quick Study Television, you're keeping us broadcasting. So all donations are used for the production of Quick Study TV and the Bible Guide and many other teaching tools. Thank you in advance for your much-needed gift.
To send to P.O. Box 150, Murraysville, Pennsylvania 156680150. The phone number is 724-733-8336. In Canada and the rest of the world, send to P.O. Box 456, Orangeville, Ontario, L9W5G2. And our phone number is 519-940-8338.
All right, Corey, it is time for Cosmic Mysteries.
It is. I'm excited.
Well, you introduce it then.
Okay, well, Ryan, why don't you take it away and tell us what is going on in the sky?
Thanks, Corey. Today we're studying the life of the father of physical astronomy. His name is Johann Kepler, and he is best known for discovering the 3 laws of planetary motion. But today we're going to focus on his other accomplishments as well as his personal life.
Johann Kepler was born on December 27, 1571 in Velderstadt, Germany. He obtained a scholarship and began attending the University of Tübingen in 1587, where he studied mathematics, astronomy, Latin, Hebrew, Greek, and the Bible. Kepler's math and astronomy professor was Michael Maslin, who was one of the few astronomy professors of that time who taught Nicholas Copernicus's idea of a sun-centered solar system. After receiving his bachelor's and master's degrees, he began studying theology, since he had already committed himself to Jesus at a young age. Kepler believed only and alone in the service of Jesus Christ. He said, "In him is all refuge, all solace." Although Kepler's plans were to serve as a minister, he ended up teaching math at a high school in Graz, Austria. Although he was close to completing his theological training, Kepler believed God was calling him to this position. In addition to teaching mathematics, he also became district mathematician. This involved surveying land, settling disputes over the accuracy of weights and measures used in business, and calendar making. Today, Kepler is considered to be the founder of physical astronomy, and one of the founding fathers of modern scientific study as a whole. To some extent, he built upon the foundational studies of Copernicus and Tycho Brahe, as well as utilizing the telescope developed by Galileo. But it was he who discovered the laws of planetary motion, and who established the discipline of celestial mechanics. Kepler's 3 laws of planetary motion helped us understand the seasons, phases of the moon, tides, eclipses, and even laid the groundwork for Isaac Newton's later work on universal gravitation. His discoveries had enormous implications for our modern world in such areas as agriculture, fishing, and even space exploration. He definitively demonstrated the heliocentricity, or the Copernican view of the solar system, and published the first ephemeris tables for tracking star motions, contributing also to eventual development of the calculus. Kepler even cleared up much of the confusion in his day between astrology and astronomy. As he made calendars, he would check the accuracy of his predictions in order to determine which were legitimate and which were not. Kepler's biographer H. Tyner says that Johann was the first scientist to investigate the long-term accuracy of astrology. His record showed that trusting in astrology could be a risky business. Not many know that Kepler also wrote science fiction. In fact, his story called The Dream was considered to be the very first modern-day science fiction story. Although Kepler was absolutely brilliant, he did not have an easy life. Since he was a child, he had struggled with his health. His adult life consisted of the deaths of 3 of his 6 children, as well as his first wife. He was also repeatedly persecuted because of his refusal to follow rules which were in contradiction to the Bible. Another traumatic incident was the trial of his superstitious mother, Katharina. She was accused of witchcraft and, if convicted, would have been tortured and burnt at the stake. It was only Kepler's skillfully drawn-up legal defense that saved her. Remarkably, even through all of these trials, Kepler remained loyal to his God. He stated his faith simply, saying, "I am a Christian." He also, regardless of his many incredible achievements, remained tremendously humble. His desire was to let my name perish, if only the name of God the Father is thereby elevated.
Kepler knew God, which is why I believe he was so successful. Most of the founding fathers of science who discovered the established laws of the universe, as well as invented amazing technologies, also knew God. When you use the Bible as your starting point, God will reveal secrets to you.
Fascinating. In fact, a lot of scientists, Ryan, and you know this, we've studied this, a guy by the name Clerk Maxwell, great Scotsman, developed the theories and the mathematics behind electromagnetic vibrations, which of course, radio waves, long before they were ever dealt with or demonstrated by the scientific method. He did it in his mind as a result of praying to God. Very interesting stuff.
Very cool.
Now, it occurs to me, you know what we all three have in common? Besides the fact that you're my daughter and he's my son.
Yeah, what?
Think about it for a moment. Think about it. What is it? What could it possibly be? It has to do with radio.
Oh, okay, now I get it. We all have our ham radio license.
We do indeed. We all have our ham radio license. My call sign is VE3TBG. Yours is?
VA3LUM.
For Luminance. And Ryan, what is your call sign?
VE3LXE.
All right, all in Ontario, Canada. And the reason I bring that up is because we are also, for all you ham radio operators, broadcasting 24/7 on shortwave radio in the 31-meter band. Just in case you wondered, it is on the screen. Shortwave radio is there for you, 9.330. Check us out. Conditions are very interesting in Sun Cycle 24. And we're getting letters from all over the world, so we wanted to mention that we are broadcasting 24/7 on the Good Friends radio network. Quick Study is on 6 times a day there at 9.330 shortwave radio for ham radio operators and shortwave radio listeners. Listen for us. We want to hear you. Of course, the radio station's also on the internet 24/7 at BibleDiscoveryTV.com. There is a time for everything according to the Bible. A time to laugh, a time to lament, a time to sorrow for a lost generation, and a time to overcome that generation. Daniel was propelled into a generation of rebellion and wickedness, and he overcame it as an agent of truth in a world full of lies. Because of Daniel, one of the most powerful pagan kings in the world, Nebuchadnezzar, waits to meet us in heaven. God's wisdom is at work in us when we learn not to judge a wicked generation, but to reach out to it with truth and God's power. With that, we pray, Lord, teach me not to complain about evil, but teach me to overcome it. We continue to work through the book of Proverbs here on Quick Study Weekend. We're reading Proverbs 19:14, where it says, "Houses and wealth are inherited from parents, but a prudent wife is from the Lord." It is one thing to have things. It is another thing to have true companionship and true fellowship. And that fellowship starts with a connection with God. Jesus Christ himself said in Revelation chapter 3, verse 20, "Behold, I stand at the door of your heart and knock, and anyone who lets me in, I will come in and have fellowship with him." That's where it begins. We define our relationships by our connection with God. Beloved, if you want to come to Jesus Christ today, let me introduce you to him. It's a simple prayer, and if you mean it, he'll respond. It goes like this: Jesus, forgive me of my sin. I believe you died on the cross and rose again, and today I give you my life, and I become devoted to you. Thank you for joining us on Quick Study today. Remember, we're supported by viewers just like you. Would you pray about becoming a regular monthly partner of this ministry? You can support us by going to BibleDiscoveryTV.com. That's BibleDiscoveryTV.com. Click on the Donate button.